A warm welcome to everyone joining us today for this webinar on teacher management in crisis contexts. This event is part of a larger series being organized by INEE's Teacher in Crisis Context Collaborative, the LEGO Foundation, UNESCO Teacher Task Force, Education International, and Oxfam. The goal of this work is really to mobilize actors across the sector in elevating support and advocating for the needs of teachers in crisis contexts. This webinar in particular is the third in a series focusing on pressing issues across practice, policy, and research about how best to improve support to teachers in 4 key areas: teacher well-being, teacher professional development, teacher management, and school leadership. If you'd like further information about previous and future events in the series and other activities and resources, please do take a look at the INEE website after the webinar. In just a moment, I'll be handing things over to some of the members of the Teachers in Crisis Context Collaborative who will be chairing this webinar today. But before we start, I'm going to briefly go over a few housekeeping items. If you're joining us today, your audio and video have been disabled, so don't worry about accidentally turning on your microphone or your video. This is just to ensure our presenters have the floor throughout the discussion. However, we'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to share your questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to include those in the discussion portion of the event. I'd also like to remind you that this session is being recorded and will be made available on the INEE website following the webinar. Lastly, closed captioning is available in English, and you can find that at the bottom of your screen. Now I'll be handing you over to our moderators today. Chris Henderson joins us from Teachers College at Columbia University, and you'll hear from him shortly. But first, I'm going to hand over to Charlotte Birkin, who joins us from UNHCR. Once more, thank you all for joining us today. We're delighted to see so many of you with us, and we're so grateful for the presenters and panelists who will be joining us in what I'm sure will be a rich discussion. Over to you, Charlotte.
Thanks, Andrew. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to this webinar. My name is Charlotte. I work for UNHCR in Western Central Africa, and I'm also co-chairing this Teacher in Crisis Context webinar series with Chris Anderson, who will moderate the discussion with our panelists today. In today's webinar, we will explore why effective teacher management practices are essential and deserve special attention, especially in context of emergency, displacement, and crisis. We will begin this webinar today with Mohamed Oure, who leads UNHCR primary education team, and who will set the stage for our discussion today by introducing us to a research currently being undertaken by UNHCR on teacher management in displacement context. Oure, over to you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Maybe next slide. Yeah. No, thank you. And I think we all know that effective teacher management is really key to ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education for all children, and this includes refugee children as well. And the role of teachers in displacement settings is particularly very important and significant, and sometimes it's the only resource that is available for children and students. However, teachers in this context work in some of the most school and classroom context, so they often face classrooms that are severely overcrowded. They teach children who speak multiple languages or from different backgrounds, some with trauma and other psychosocial issues, but also children who are, mixed ability. But unfortunately, some of the key teacher management aspects, whether it's relates to their recruitment or management in more broader terms, is often very challenging. So UNHCR has been trying to, undertake a study, typology of study, which I will try to share information about it so that we can be able to have a greater understanding across, all the actors, but more importantly, harmonize and coordinate our efforts to support teachers in this context. Maybe next slide. So, what does the typology of teachers of persons of concern cover? Its purpose is to identify and describe a typology of teachers of persons of concern to UNHCR. So we want to really understand who are the types of teachers who provide support in this context, which is also very, very varied. And you can see, some of the research questions that we are going to focus on. And then we'll also be looking at the ways in which this particular, typology of teachers that we will develop influence aspects such as teacher management, professional development, their career path, professional relationships, and also their well-being. So it's going to be in 3 phases. So the first phase, we are going to, do it across 14 countries, and you will see, the countries of study. And then we will create, the typology of teachers, and then we will then use this typology of teacher to, support change across the different aspects, whether it's, the aspect of teacher supply, teacher management, and professional development. And so it's really, a piece of work that is going to strengthen the evidence base, especially in that context where we are now pushing for the inclusion of refugee children in national education systems. So Charlotte, back to you. I will stop here.
Many thanks, Ure. And I'll hand over right now to Chris for the following.
Thank you.
Okay, so we just have a brief video here that we're going to watch from Ethiopia, and after that we'll head into introducing the panelists and the panel discussion. So Sarah, if you can press play on the video, that would be amazing.
Hi, good morning. So today we are talking about the role of citizens in the respect of human rights and justice. I'm looking for the job, and the job that I get is teaching. Before I come here, it was not on my choice that I can be a teacher. But now, it is good. So I was also graded by ARA and UNHCR for diploma, because Minister of Education said we are not recognizing those teachers who are teaching in the refugee camp. So then the ARA decided that I need to grade or to upgrade those teachers to be good teachers.
They teach us for the teaching methodology. And now the way that we can teach the students, and we know the way that we can treat our students. They take us to there in college, and I complete my diploma.
Okay, so that brief video there, the thing we really wanted to focus on is the importance of qualifications and certification as a key part of teacher management. And we'll be touching more on those issues soon with our case study presentations. But just firstly, to introduce myself, my name is Chris Henderson. I am the co-chair of INEE's Teachers in Crisis Context Collaborative, and also I'm co-chairing this case study process in the event series on the case studies. One thing we really want to draw upon to focus on through these case studies and through our presentation today is the emerging call to action that is going to be one of the key products of this INEE TiC event series, And so just to briefly go over the call to action as it stands now, and this is a call to action that we will revise and iterate throughout the event series. But the first call to action is to prioritise teachers from the very onset of emergencies through to recovery and development. The second call is for us all to respect teachers, and that includes volunteers and facilitators of teaching and learning in formal and non-formal settings. Our third call is to enable teachers to be able to support all learners by continuously investing in and dramatically improving the nature and quality of teacher preparation, their continuous development, and sustained support. Our fourth is to support teacher wellbeing, and that's recognising the impact that many crisis contexts have on teachers in their own lives and their ability to do their work. And finally, and in my personal view, most importantly, is to listen to teachers and to really hear their experience, their expertise and their opinions, and to really include our teachers' voices in the work that we do, from policy making to research to decision making. And so on that note, I want to invite and introduce our wonderful panelists that are with us today. Firstly, from the Education Development Trust, we have Helen West, who is a senior consultant and has co-authored one of the case studies that will be coming out soon in our case study publication. Helen is joined by Donovan Amenya, who leads the Education Development Trust's engagement with the Ministry of Education in Kenya. Coming all the way from Myanmar, we have Crystal White, who is a program manager with the Rural Indigenous Sustainable Education Organisation, an NGO working in the north of Myanmar. And Crystal has also co-authored a fantastic case study on teacher management from the context that she is working in. And finally, we have Dr. Kibede Tsagaye. And Dr. Kibede is the Senior Program Coordinator for Education, and he works with the Intergovernmental Authority on Development in East Africa. So if I could first invite Crystal to share her brief presentation that covers some of the work she's been doing in Myanmar, that would be fantastic. Crystal, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, as Chris Henderson already introduced, my name is Crystal, and I've been working with RISE for almost 10 years right now, and I'm very happy for this opportunity to present this research with all of you in this INEE network. So the research title we have come up is Community Teachers in Myanmar, the constant in a state of flux. The need for equitable stipend payments have never been greater. Before I go to the detail of the presentation, let me briefly introduce RISE. RISE is a network of 16 indigenous providers of education. And then we work, although we are working in different parts of Burma and Myanmar, we also have a common problem. This common problem is paying an equitable salary to the community teachers that are supported by the RISE network. This problem causes us challenges every year. And so a more sustainable funding model for community teacher stipends is really necessary in our country. So this research highlights the role of community teachers who educate indigenous children in conflict-affected areas of the country, often at great personal risk and sacrifice. So RISE commissioned research in early 2021 to explore the challenges and opportunities for creating a more sustainable and equitable salary payment system for community teachers. This research acknowledges and honors all community teachers in Myanmar and found that the amounts paid to the community teachers do not follow global guidance and good practices for equitable teacher compensation in conflict and recovery contexts. All community teachers in Myanmar are typically recruited from the local community, speak the local indigenous language of the children they teach, and continue to provide education throughout periods of conflict and crisis. Even during 2020, when the government had shut down schools due to COVID, some rice members were able to keep their schools open with the safety measures in ethnic education providers areas. This is because they are used to having to adjust education services and are always working to keep children and teachers safe while limiting disruption to children's education. The past year of the military coup, we have seen the same. Our community teachers continue to provide a necessary and vital service to children in Myanmar. So the graph that you are seeing is a comparison between government and community teachers in Burma through our primary data mining research method. So about 80% of both government and community teachers in rice supported schools are women. Community teachers are typically younger than government teachers, in their late 20s rather than in their early 30s. And they have a lower education, usually high school graduates rather than university graduates. Unlike government teachers, community teachers tend to teach in more challenging school environments, such as low resource multi-grade classrooms, and often lack training and confidence in subject matter knowledge and pedagogical skills. Community teachers receive between 40 to 100,000 Myanmar Jet per month, which is about 20 to 56 US dollars. Because community teacher stipends are low, over 40% of community teachers hold a second job in order to support themselves and their families. This is much lower than the salaries paid to teachers by both government and also the humanitarian sector. Government starting salaries for the first-year teacher deployed to a school is about 132 Myanmar Jet, which is about 74 in US dollar. The education and emergency EIE sector in Myanmar also pays much more. They have been working to align volunteer teacher salaries in Rakhine State, which is in northern Myanmar, northern part of Burma, and Kachin State and Rakhine. They reached government salary standards in 2019. So our research questions were informed by a series of internal and external consultations, and these research questions also conducted with indigenous providers of education and also development partners. So if the time allows, I'll be happy to go into more details of the research. And then this picture that you see is a picture of one of our community teachers serving in the very challenging conflict areas in northern Shan State. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer more. And thanks again. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Crystal. And one important point I want to make is that in your case study, which will be published and promoted soon, you mentioned case studies from other parts of the world, such as Afghanistan, and how you wove learning from that into the project in Myanmar. So that was really, really great to see. Next, I'd like to welcome Donovan and Helen to present on the Education Development Trust work in Kenya.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. And I hope colleagues on the line will be able to see the presentation. So today's presentation focuses on opportunities for refugee teachers in camps in Kenya to gain teaching qualification. Just to give you a quick background about the study, the Kenyan case study is part of the multi-country case study into management of primary teachers in refugee settings, carried out in partnership with IEP UNESCO and funded by Dubai Cares. So the Kenyan case study focused on Kakuma and Dadaab refugee camps, as well as Kalobey settlement area, as well as the surrounding host communities in 2 counties in Kenya, namely Garissa and Turkana. In terms of the demographic profile of the refugee teachers, majority of the teachers working in the camp settings are drawn from the refugee community. And for 38% overall of all the refugee teachers surveyed, the secondary school education was the highest level of education. And almost half of the teachers surveyed had no teaching qualification. So what are the opportunities for these teachers to gain teaching qualifications in Kenya? One, the government of Kenya accords the refugees within her borders equal access to education opportunities. So this means the refugees have a right to access teacher training colleges in Kenya so that they can gain formal qualification just like another Kenyan national. So we found out that within the camps, there are also several opportunities for refugee teachers to gain the requisite qualifications to work as teachers. One, several agencies are supporting the teachers to acquire a certificate course in early childhood development and education. And also there is an agreement with one of the government parastatals, such as the Kenya Institute of Special Education, to run a certificate course in special needs education. The Jesuit Refugee Service particularly supports the teachers to acquire certificate in early childhood development. So in addition to those, we also have two public universities, that's Masinde Muliro University and Kenyatta University, running diplomas in primary teacher education. The Masinde Muliro University offered an opportunity for teachers who could not be directly admitted to a diploma course to offer like a foundational bridging course so that their grades could be brought to a point where they could get the minimum qualification for admission into a diploma program. So important to mention that the Kenyatta University diploma was part of the borderless higher education for refugees that was run by York University in Canada. The York University also ran a foundational course for the refugee teachers. So reflecting what are some of the challenges and opportunities for refugee teachers as they pursue education. One, a low number of refugee teachers meet the minimum qualification for the Teacher Service Commission. The Teacher Service Commission in Kenya require that for anyone aspiring to train as a teacher and to gain the qualification, they must have attained a minimum grade of C+ in their Kenya Certificate of Secondary School examination at the secondary school level. So unfortunately, most of the refugee teachers do not meet that qualification. In addition to that, there are also practical barriers for refugees to access teacher training colleges. One, as Kenya runs encampment policy, it limits movement of refugee teachers out of the camps unless they have express permission from the Refugee Affairs Secretariat. And too often that comes within, they're given a short period of time. So that means they can't be out for a long period of time to attend and complete P1 teacher training college. Nevertheless, we also found that the qualification offered in the camp one, because most of these teachers, even if they get a diploma in primary teacher education, in most cases you find that one is not recognized by the Teacher Service Commission, because as I said earlier, one of the key things they look at is as to whether a teacher attained a minimum grade at the end of secondary school that gives him or her the right or enables him to access teacher training college, to teacher training course. So most of the refugee teachers, even if they get a diploma, it doesn't lead to a formal qualification that will get them be formally recruited. On the positive side, we found that teachers who had completed various courses supported by various agencies in the camps have been able to secure work by various agencies in the camps. They have been able to be employed by various agencies. And also for those who pursued the certificate that was offered by York University, they have been able to use it as a springboard for them to acquire higher education within and outside Kenya. Also important on the positive side, and perhaps part of the durable solutions, most of these refugee teachers, once they have this qualification, they have been able to secure employment and they've gone back to their home countries. Example is in Somalia, where we found several teachers whom we interviewed, and actually some of them had already gone back to their home country, and they said that once they got the certificate, it was not difficult for them to get to secure a job either with the government or with various NGOs in their home countries. So that really motivated them to go back to their countries. That's a quick summary of the case study for Kenya, and I'm happy to maybe answer questions from colleagues as may be needed. Thank you.
Wonderful, Donovan. Thank you so much for that really concise but comprehensive summary. Next up, I'd like to invite Dr. Kebede Atagaye to present on some of IGAD's work around the Djibouti Declaration. Dr. Kebede, over to you. Dr. Kebede, are you there?
Yes, I was muted. No, I was thanking everybody, and then I was saying that my presentation will focus on preparation for teacher training, a regional teacher training program. And then in this presentation, I'll talk about the comparative advantage of regional organizations, and then also what we have been doing, and then what actually happened in the course of the training after 2019. The IGAD is a regional organization. It is a membership of 8 countries, one of which is Kenya. And then we deal with a number of social, economic, and political issues. Education is one of the social development agenda. We have a large number of refugee population in the region, about 4.5 million. The majority, about a third of this is school-age children. And then one of the major challenges for quality education in the refugee and returning communities, as well as host communities, is the quality of teachers. So we took that as one of the starting points to alleviate this problem. In 2017, we adopted a regional declaration called the Djibouti Declaration. The Djibouti Declaration is essentially about refugees, returnees, and host communities education. And one of the key components of the refugee education is teachers training. And we started the preparation in partnership with GIZ and a number of other partners to respond to the challenges faced by low quality of skills among teachers, the problem of certification, and also access to skills that are very important. So what we have done in the preparation for this was to facilitate the selection and identification of teachers, and then also identifying locations, especially in institutions of teacher training in the member states. So far, we are working in 3 countries. And then we wanted to identify the implementation of fast-tracking training and certification of the teachers. And then we try to align progressively on the pay through advocacy. In fact, we are not involved directly on the incentives, and then support continuous pre-service and in-service training of teachers. And then still in the preparation for the launching of the teacher training, we conducted a series of regular consultations with relevant stakeholders, including identifying the key supporters in the process, and also exploratory missions to refugee settlements, where we talk to teachers to identify their pressing needs. And in fact, one of the most important needs that they identified was the training in skills, in various skills. And then we planned for the training, and then we procured the services of a very recognized international consulting firm, which organized the training in different sessions. So now I'm not talking about what happened during the training, but about how we started to respond to the major challenges facing teachers and the schools in getting quality education. And in that sense, most of it is just advocacy, coordination, policy harmonization, creating of policy spaces, and then facilitating the implementation or coordinating the implementation. So these are some of the things that I really want to talk about. If there are questions, I would respond. The paper that you have as a case study is essentially about the preliminary stages of the preparation to the teacher training. Since 2021 February, we have started the training itself. About 300 teachers have been trained. We are now closing, and then we are continuing to expand the training to additional number of teachers in 3 countries that we have considered as a pilot case. When we finalize this round of trainings, we'll document the experience, the lessons learned, and also the challenge that we have encountered. So far, this is what I really want to tell you. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kebede. It's always a pleasure to hear you speak of IGAD's achievements and just groundbreaking work with the Djibouti Declaration. We've just put the call to action back on the screen here. So that's prioritizing teachers, respecting teachers, enabling teachers, supporting teachers' well-being, and really importantly, listening to teachers' expertise, experiences, and opinions. And so in the panel discussion now, as best as we can, we will draw on this call to action to inform our conversation. I also just want to promote the fact that there is a publication called Promising Practices in Teacher Professional Development, Wellbeing and Management that was published in 2019. And we're actually going to be publishing a second version of that because we've received a number of new case studies, and we've selected 18 across 3 key themes that we'll be publishing in an updated version, along with the original version of the case studies as well. So keep an eye out for that being promoted by INEE in the very near future. We're just in the final stages of copy editing and design at the moment. But if I could invite all of our panelists to turn your cameras on and join us here so we can have a conversation around your presentations. And Hure from UNHCR, I'd welcome you to join our panel discussion also if you feel keen. But the first question I have, which is a little bit off script already, I want to pick up on the video we watched from Ethiopia and the teachers talking about the importance of their diplomas, of being qualified, and what that means for them. And I wonder if you can talk about your own context where you work and just speak more on the importance of qualifications or certification to teachers, particularly in terms of how they see themselves as professionals, but also how they think about their own role in the community and their futures. And so, Helen, maybe should we start with you?
Sure. Yes, definitely. Thanks, Chris. So in Kenya, the role of certification, as you've heard, is actually there's a lot of promising practice happening there, and that teachers in camps are able to gain diplomas and to gain certificates. For them, it even impacts on the salary that they receive. So as incentive teachers, there are different bandings, and so you can be classed as trained and untrained. And that's not to say that the salary is enough, but it does have an impact on the salary that they receive. As you heard from Donovan as well, it has an impact on their future career plans, not only within Kenya, but it opens up possibilities to return to their home countries and work for other organizations, to work within government. In certain regions in Somalia, they recognize the diplomas that they can gain. And so I think for how they see themselves as professionals, then being able to gain certificates is key. In the teacher survey that we undertook, one of the key issues was that they had opportunities to quite a few training, generally up to about 5 days long, And one of the key problems with those trainings is that they didn't get any certificates or recognition for it. And so the motivation was somewhat lacking. Whereas when they're able to undertake a certificate or diploma, they get that certification then that they can take with them and that they can keep. And it is recognized somewhere. We heard from some people who they'd undertaken the York University certificate, and then they were able, for example, to pursue higher education in Denmark as a result of that. And so it definitely goes beyond their immediate careers in the camps.
Thank you. And we actually have an audience question here. And Dr. Kibede, I can see you've got your hand up. So I'm going to build on Helen's response and ask this question to you, Dr. Kibede, but it's along the theme of certification also. And it's really the idea around that ministries of education and the like have concerns about lowering the standards of teacher certification or programs and lowering the standards of pathways for refugee teachers in particular. So are you able to say more about what this fast tracking of training and the fast tracking of the certification process actually looks like? Are ministries of education supporting this move?
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, colleagues. I think this is a very important question, and it's one important component of the Djibouti Declaration, recognizing that certification and recognition of certificates was a very big challenge, not only for teachers in emergencies and in the refugee settlements, but also across the region. If you fit in regional organizations, one of the major challenges facing universities and the student movements was certification, recognition of certificates that are acquired in different countries. So indeed, this is one of the challenges facing teachers. Indeed, this is one of the felt needs of both teachers and the schools in emergencies and also in the mainstream society, especially in host communities. And then as IGAD, especially if I speak from our perspective, the Djibouti Declaration clearly specified the need for developing a regional qualifications framework and also accelerating and fast tracking the certification process. You know, qualification regimes are so diverse across countries, and they are also to a certain extent nationalistic. And it takes quite a while to harmonize, ask for member states to agree on common qualification frameworks, qualification criteria, so that they recognize and certify learning outcomes of other countries and also refugees and displaced population. So I think what I can say that we have started the regional process of developing a regional qualifications framework. We are at an advanced stage working with UNESCO, UNHCR, Education Cannot Wait, and many other GIZ through the government of Germany and many other partners. And in the next 6 months to 1 year, we will have some concrete standard for recognizing and accrediting certifications. With regard to the teacher training that we have been conducting, we are providing certificates that would add value, not necessarily academic qualifications, but recognition of what they have achieved over the last 1 year in the training process. So they have that certificate that could build into their additional qualifications that can contribute to their being admitted to universities or to training programs that count for their certification and qualification. But this actually has lifted their morale. And in fact, before the training in August, we started recording through a very professional recording company recruited by GIZ in one of our sites in Gambela. The teachers were so much forward-looking, very excited about the training opportunities. And then we had a lot of stories that we heard from the teachers that we have played the audio of. So, you know, there are these things that are moving, and especially the advantage from a regional perspective is that, you know, countries are doing things in their own ways. But this is a novel approach of teacher training, managing teachers in crises by bringing a regional dimension. A regional dimension as one, the common agenda setting, and then also joint implementation of programs, avoiding duplication of efforts, and to a certain extent saving time. We have developed curriculum, for example, that can be used in a number of countries, and so many partners are now interested in practicing or implementing that curriculum that we have developed for a short-term training. So a lot of stories that we can actually share in the course of time. Sorry, back to you, Chris.
Fantastic, and that was a question from Dr. Mary Mendenhall, who also passes on her appreciation for the important work that IGAD is doing with the Djibouti Declaration. Crystal, I want to turn to you briefly because a key part of your case study is the improved stipends that are provided for community teachers. And we know one of the key issues with teacher management is the challenge of recruiting teachers. Unfortunately, people, whether they're in a refugee setting or internally displaced, don't often see teaching as an attractive option or career prospect. But your case study mentions how improved stipends and improved recognition of teachers is improving the attractiveness of the profession. So do you want to talk more about how this improved stipend may be improving recruitment options also?
Thank you, Chris. Yeah. So the teachers in the communities are providing their services either based on the demands of the communities or like pressures from the community, and also some are really how to say, at least 1 or 2 year services coming from the faith-based communities. So there are different ways recruiting mechanisms happening in the communities. And yeah, teacher qualification, relating to teacher qualification, and also trying to build their professional lessons and also capacity building is also really important, because those teachers didn't come with like high degrees and certificates since they joined to serve as community teachers. They came with a spirit that like they can contribute something to the community, and then either because of their inner spirit or by the community's need. So for RISE, we also have both pre-service and in-service teacher training, and we have a teacher training manual that is also based with teacher competency framework. So like we are kind of in many ways like backtracking the way we after the teachers are recruited on the ground, and then we're trying to develop their skills and professional development, and then trying to promote their career goals and also like their tenure and in their teacher's position, so that they can continue to they need to enjoy their work, and also they need to see how much impact they are making in the communities. And also by connecting each other, teachers, and trying to connect networks amongst themselves, like peer learning network, and also trying to share stories across them to share inspirations. So this is particularly in the current situation in our country, like more and more areas are becoming, unfortunately, like IDPs and conflict, active conflict zone. So what I have seen is also like teachers take more responsibilities, and it's already a pre-existing pickup from the teachers, but even more so like teachers trying to volunteer in many of the ways, even like helping the basic health support, or trying to set up the tents and basic supplies for the IDP camp. So they are very responsive to the needs of the community, and while recruiting it, they may not know what pathway they are walking into it, but by continue to serve in the position, it also grew the, how to say, it increased the drive to become a more responsive teachers and a more helpful teachers to the community. So in terms of like linking back to the teacher stipends, we're trying to promote teachers' qualifications and skills, and also like trying to, it's not equitable yet that we are supporting, but trying to reflect what to the best extent as possible with their experience and also their services and qualifications. But the teachers that we we love to have a training, and we love to get learning materials, but also they are hungry. They need to feed themselves and feed their families, and also they need to share those food with the communities while the community is also having those difficulties. So the attractiveness is not, at the moment, is not in a very a positive way yet, like trying to enhance their career to gain this degree so that I can be promoted into higher position. We are not there yet, especially at the moment, but to be able to provide those basic needs for the teachers so that the existing teachers will continue to serve in their positions and with pride and with sacrifice, but also trying to attract other teachers who are willing to provide their contribution, something to their communities is also very important. That's why linking back to the research is community teacher stipend is really key to continue this movement and impact. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And one of the key messages from a lot of our work in teacher wellbeing is that for teachers to flourish inside the classroom, teachers must flourish outside the classroom too. And I think that's where your work and this broader focus on effective teacher management is so important. Hure, if I can come to you, I'm really interested in the idea of teachers as persons of concern. And I wonder if you can expand a little bit more on the central role of effective teacher management through appropriate compensation, certification, qualification, what role this might play in mitigating or alleviating that status as persons of concern.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, and I think I agree with the previous panelists, and their discussion around qualifications, recognition, compensation, and these are some of the key challenges to effective teacher management in this context. And this is what we are trying to do with this piece of research that we have is to see whether we can create a shared understanding around the teacher management, but also some of these often important but also difficult issues. So oftentimes, and I will give, Helen talked about the colleague on the case of Kenya, and I was working there before moving to the headquarters. 80% of the teachers who deliver the education program, providing instructional support to over 90,000 students, are refugees, and many of them are not trained. The average compensation that they receive is less than $70 a month. And as I've mentioned earlier, the environment they work in, the classrooms are very large. Oftentimes the resources they need is not available, and so on. Yeah, but one of the other key aspects is how do we also address the restrictions related to work, and it's even beyond education, restrictions related to movement, and even Kabede was talking about the recognition. So oftentimes there are many teachers who've come with who have been teachers in their home countries, but they spend decades in a place like Kakuma without the prospect of ever receiving recognition of their prior trainings and so on. Yeah. So And I think the role that they play is obviously, it's obvious to us, despite the fact that they face a lot of these issues, they are the key to, especially the teachers who are persons of concern themselves, are key to the to refugee children access to education. But their role is even beyond that. They support, student well-being. They are extremely motivated, because these are their children. They are, people from themselves. And if we can collectively, think about how to, coordinate the work that we do. So whether, if we are doing the trainings, do we really need to offer, the type of trainings that are not necessarily recognized? And how do we align more closely to national, teacher management and practices? So this is something that is very critical. And I will also say that there is a lot of focus on inclusion of refugee children in the national education system. But this also offers, teachers of persons of concern an opportunity, because they can also accrue some significant personal and professional development from this conversation. And yeah, so we'll also need to put that in mind and ensure that they're included in national teacher management and development systems. And this, will cut across the range, whether it's in terms of their management, distribution, compensation, and that. Yeah. So back to you, Chris. Thank you.
This time I was the one on mute. Thank you so much, Hore. Just as a final question or reflection, because there are a number of questions from our audience that we can't quite get to because of time. So I'm going to try and package them as one question. Has COVID-19 heightened our awareness of teachers' needs in terms of compensation, recruitment, certification? Has it heightened our awareness of their needs, or has COVID-19 in fact been a distraction and has set us back from making progress on effective teacher management? So if anyone's got any reflections on what impact COVID-19 has had, feel free to share.
Can come in just until the others. I think what COVID-19 has informed us and brought to our attention is that more training, more skills development, especially in the digital skills, in the audiovisual skills, in the ICT skills. And I think if we have to really benefit from this trauma, from the pandemic, it is in the building of the skills of our teachers and also the skills of our students and the community. I think it has really made it sure that we cannot survive in the traditional way, always relying on the traditional classroom lecture method and student-teacher contacts. In fact, the challenges are insurmountable, especially in the rural areas, in the remote refugee hosting communities, which are underserved, underprivileged, very less well connected. That the challenge is there. But I think if we have to make any progress in terms of making education equitable, making quality education accessible to everyone, we have to continue the training of the teachers. We have to build infrastructure in the remote rural areas, because we would never know what emergencies would come, what health hazards would follow COVID. And in fact, preparedness is very important. Part of the preparedness includes preparing teachers for the unforeseen emergencies that we will be dealing with, because now we are moving from emergency to emergency. Already teachers are in an emergency situation, and then they have to prepare for emergencies that they have no control of. And I think society has the responsibility to really equip them both in terms of skills and technologies that they will respond to. Back to you.
Thank you, Kibede. Any other reflections on the impact of COVID-19, whether it's heightened our awareness and priorities, or has in fact been a distraction?
Sure, if I can come in, Chris, I think I'd like to build upon what Dr. Kibede just said about the host communities as well. So when we conducted our research, due to it being during COVID and not being able to travel, for example, we were able to undertake interviews over Zoom, for example, within the camps, within Kakuma and Dadaab. And so there is a connection there. Whereas in the host communities, that isn't always the case. And so the nearby host communities in Garissa and Turkana, there isn't even that basic connection to electricity, to Wi-Fi. Yeah. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of as well.
I think, Chris, I'll also say, yeah, it might, in both, I think it could have done both. Yeah, but I think, but one of the important thing is that it might, contributed to exacerbation of what the challenges that we have already, discussed today. And I think this therefore means that we need to do more to be able to support, because especially in many of the contexts where camp setups like Kakuma, where refugee teachers have been at the forefront in terms of the COVID-19 education responses. So they have even great, they were called into greater responsibilities, despite the challenges that they have in terms of their trainings and the support that they get. Yeah. So I think what that means is that we need to do more and better support them. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, with only 2 minutes left of our hour, I'll transition in a second. But yeah, I just want to say a heartfelt thanks to each of you for your ongoing advocacy and leadership for teachers' work around the world. And yeah, we're so lucky to have had each of you here today contributing your expertise and insights. And we look forward to being able to continue our work with you as we seek to improve the way teachers are recognised, compensated and supported in their work. But by all means, everyone keep an eye out for the case studies. They're on the horizon. They'll be shared, promoted by INEE very soon. But on that note, back to you, Charlotte, and thanks once again, everyone.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to our wonderful panelists. It was such a rich and insightful conversation, I think, and it was so inspiring to see the flurry of activity in the chat as well with our participants, and it kind of gives you, encourages you to creating these sort of spaces to hold these types of conversations. So thank you so much for offering your time. And I see there's been quite a bit of request for resources, so we'll do our best to share any resources that the panelists are willing to offer, and along with the recording of the webinar and anything else featured today. And we'd also like to turn your attention to additional resources around teacher support and teacher management in particular, including the Teacher Task Force's guidance note on developing a crisis-sensitive teacher policy, as well as their forthcoming module on crisis-sensitive teacher policy. And as Chris has already mentioned, there's a case study publication on the horizon, so keep an eye out for that with more really rich case studies on so many wonderful actors around the world supporting teachers in different contexts. And the TIC Collaborative continues to produce resources and tools that are all open access, available in multiple languages, including a forthcoming resources really focused on the challenges teachers have been facing over the last 2 years during the pandemic, particularly distance education and distance learning, as well as a technical note focused on supporting teachers. And lastly, there will be one last webinar in this series on school leadership in the coming months, so keep an eye out for that. But thank you all so much for joining us today, and a sincere thanks to our wonderful panelists again for offering us your time and really shining a light on these, as Chris said, and I think as many of you touched on, these difficult questions, but necessary questions. And please feel free to visit the event series website and INEE.org for any further resources and questions. And take care, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.